Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today we are pulling out all the stops for my send-off cook on the Char-Griller Akorn. I'm going to show you how to pull off the perfect double indirect setup and why that's an absolute must in something like the Akorn, and I can't think of a better way to say farewell than brisket. So that's exactly what we're cooking today. So before I reveal the secret of everything that I've learned after the past year with the Char-Griller Akorn and 15 years now with Kamado style grills in terms of how to get the absolute most out of it, let me start off by addressing the elephant in the room, which is, James, why are you saying goodbye to the Akorn? This is a grill that has grown a bit of a soft spot in my heart over the last year. Ever since Middleby acquired Char-Griller and Kamado Joe, it became one part of a big happy family, and it gave me the opportunity for them to send this to me at no cost so I could play with it. And we've had a ton of fun. I put it together against the Kettle Joe, the Kamado Joe, Big Joe, and more recently against my inexpensive offset that I bought. And I think for the price, it's a fantastic value, especially since we apply some of our hacks to solve some of the challenges that you might run into out of the box. But if it's doing so great, why does it have to go? Well, there's two main reasons for this. One, two of those reasons are actually sitting in the garage in boxes, and I've not yet unboxed them, and I need to make space. And there's one more coming, so I have a really exciting spring that I can't wait to reveal, but you're gonna have to wait just a little bit longer. So make sure you have the notification bell turned on so when you're alerted when those come out. But we are gonna have some epic head-to-heads this spring. You're not gonna wanna miss that. The second one, outside of space, is just usability. And so one person, as much as Sarah's not watching, right? As much as one person can't actually use more than one grill at a time, or very seldom, I'm just not using it often enough on a daily or weekly basis to justify taking this away from someone who could use it. So I found a great home who promises to give it the proper, tender, loving care, and most importantly, smoke it deserves on a weekly basis. And so I think it's just going to be happier, and they'll be happier if it's getting used far more often. So now that you know in terms of why and how we got to this being the last cook, let me start to fill you in on the secrets in terms of turning out an amazing brisket on the Char-Griller Akorn. So in general, where possible, I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. It can get too easy to just start adding all these unnecessary steps, and it takes more time and adds more complexity and sometimes cost to get to a result. And so even stripping things back down to their basics, you can do pretty much anything amazing with barbecue, simple ingredients, salt, pepper, garlic. But something like the Char-Griller Akorn, which is incredibly energy efficient. This will run all day on a couple pieces of charcoal. We do need to throw a couple little tricks at it to make it work harder at turning out some good smoke. I'll show you a little clip here from a previous cook that I did where this ran all day, and if you look at the charcoal pile inside, not only did it not burn some of the smoking wood pieces that I placed right in there, I had almost the same amount of charcoal at the end of the cook versus what I started. So we need to ramp up the inefficiency. And even in the cold weather, so I'm about -7 degrees Fahrenheit today, it's a cool day up in the Great White North, this is not enough to still make a really inefficient grill use a lot more charcoal. So this is where the double indirect setup comes in. If you haven't heard of the double indirect setup, it's even more important in something like the Char-Griller Akorn because we need to try and get a fire working and burning smoke. I've placed wood chips, pellets down in the bottom. They don't combust like they do on every other Kamado that I own. I've even left wood chunks in the charcoal pile. As I mentioned earlier, some of those don't burn. So to promote a more inefficient fire, which yes, we want this on purpose, we're going to use a second set of deflectors. I have two Half Moon ceramic deflectors that I'm going to place on top of my original deflector, and that air gap is critical. This is the same idea when you set up for pizza. Every pizza setup has first your deflector to block some of the heat, an air gap, and then your pizza stone. The theory is the same here, where we want to be able to protect our bottom from overdoing and allow us to ramp up the energy in the fire to get more clean smoke circulating throughout our dome. And this has been an absolute winner in every Kamado style grill that I've ever done, and including in my head-to-head against the offset, I did this and got a remarkably similar result out of this. So I know it works already in the Char-Griller Akorn. The second set of adjustments that we're going to make is with my bark builder rub. Now I shared this in my rub video late last year, but I've never shown it on camera. So today I'm just gonna take a few extra seconds, show you how that comes together. But for something like the Char-Griller Akorn that's not moving near as much air as any offset, even the Oklahoma Joes for that matter, let alone my Smoke North offsets or my Kamado Joe Big Joes, we need to give this every advantage that we can throw at it. If we don't do this, the bark in comparison, it comes out okay, but it still just has a bit of a cooked steak color to it versus that traditional Texas style bark. And so we're gonna put a couple of extra ingredients in our rub that I don't normally use, which will just help really change the color. It's not gonna throw off our taste profile all that much. It'll add a little bit more depth. And we're gonna do the exact same thing with the mop sauce. Now I'm gonna make a tweak to the mop sauce. I'm actually gonna do it with beef tallow instead of butter. And that is just gonna add an extra layer of lushness and really help make sure that we get a color that comes off the Char-Griller Akorn. You will not visually be able to tell the difference versus something that comes off an offset. So all those little hacks are going to come together. So before we get started, let me take you back a little bit earlier in the day, show you how to set up for the double indirect setup, and then I'll fill you in on all the seasoning details in terms of my bark builder rub recipe that is sure to fool even the keen-eye observer in terms of did that come off an offset or off a Kamado. Okay, so I've cleaned out our ash collector, and in the past, everything that I've tried to put in here, whether it be chips or pellets, haven't combusted. But since on all of my other grills, when we do double indirect, we get a little bit more hot coals falling down, it helps accelerate that. So I'm hoping that might be the secret here for the Akorn. So what I'm gonna do is just add, mostly for experimentation purposes, some cherry wood chips into the bottom of our ash collector here, just to see if at the end of the cook, when we open this back up, if like before, we're looking at fresh wood, or if the double indirect method is enough on the Akorn to help start taking advantage of this bottom ash drawer slash ash collector hack. Let's get this back in. So for our smoking wood, I'm not going to use this, but just to show the size illustration, this is one split that I've cut down with my miter saw in half. I've been using a bunch of these inside my Oklahoma Joes. So I've taken one of these and with my axe, split it into 3 small pieces. So just to give you a comparison, this is about 5 inches of wood split into 3. So we have basically small kindling that we can work with. And I'm just going to lay these across so there's great airflow on the bottom and stack our charcoal on top so that we can get some smoke. Let's get these in. Let's add some fresh charcoal, cover this up. We don't want to overfill our basket since, again, this is a very energy efficient grill. So I want to try and keep a smaller, hotter fire down low. So let's add some Fogo. Okay, that looks good. It may not show up, but there's a slight bias towards the back as that tends to be the airflow pattern inside of almost every Kamado grill that I've used. So let's get our Grill Blazer grill gun. Bottom vent is all the way open, and I'll leave the top vent open. We're just gonna get a little bit of heat inside our grill, and then I'll show you how to set up for double indirect. Take it fast forward while we fire it up. All right, that looks good. Let's close it up. Okay, we're up to temperature. Clear this steam out. Let me show you how to set up for our double indirect in the Akorn. So first we're gonna install the stock deflector plate. Next, what we need is to create a little bit of an air gap. Now the deflector stones I have are half moons, and so I'm not able to prop these up with just a single stone, but if you had a pizza stone or some spare deflectors, what you need is a small air gap. So you could either use some metal, or I'm gonna use fire bricks, place them right on the deflector, and that's gonna give us some clearance from our first deflector to our second deflector. Okay, those look good, and then we'll drop in our cooking grids. Close this back up, let it stabilize, and we'll be ready to throw on our brisket. For our rub, I'll put all the details down in the description below, but this is my brisket bark builder rub. There's lots of little ingredients. I've already added, you can see the white sugar, brown sugar, pepper, some Lowry's, I forget everything else. And then in my pepper cannon, I've loaded up a bunch of everything. So we've got our allspice, some coffee beans, some sesame seeds. This is gonna add a lot of our black color along with some mustard seeds. So again, everything will be in the description down below. I'll take you fast forward while we grind this up and get ready to mix it all into our rub. There we go. We've got all of our dark colored ingredients ground up and added in. So I'll just mix these all together and maybe get a shaker, get our brisket out, rejoin you in a second. We're ready to get this on. Okay, everything's ready. Got our meter probes, our rub all mixed together. This is what it looks like for colors. You can see a little bit darker than normal. That's going to help give us a great bark. So let's get this out, rub it up, get our probes on, and I'll meet you back over by the pit. Okay, take one probe, go for the point. Installing vertically, as that'll give me more of a dome temperature, and I'm going to install one parallel to the grid right through the flat here for tracking that. And this will give us more of our cooking grate temperature. Looks good. Let's close it up. Okay, our brisket's been on for about an hour and a half, and I want to start making up a mop sauce. So I'm going to do a substitution here that I think might just work. Normally we start our mop sauce with a base of butter, but instead I'm going to do it with some beef tallow. So this is suet. My butcher sells this already pre-ground for only $1 or $2 a package. So this is prime grade beef fat that's already been sort of broken down into these nice small pieces, and I think that's going to do an even better job at adding a little bit more lush flavor than the butter. So let's get this out of the package into our pot. Turn on our conduction heat here. Keep an eye on that while we're working away. Start it off low and maybe bump it up. Next, we're going to get to work on adding in our onions so that it can incorporate, start to render down. We want to give it a couple minutes to be able to yellow up and simmer along. So I'll take you fast forward while I get the skin off the onion. Okay, perfect. Just going to do a coarse chop. Doesn't need to be too fine on our onion, about 1/4 inch in the pot. Okay, our onions are simmering along nicely. Let's add some garlic. If you were going with fresh, you would use about 1 complete set of cloves. Just remove the skins and add them in. Get a little acidity, so we're going to go with the juice as well as the remaining part of 1 whole lemon. Never get this right, but Worcester sauce, or however it's properly pronounced. Either some Cholula or Tabasco for some hot sauce. Also add a little bit of vinegar into our sauce. Some ketchup, salt, some pepper, and maybe a beer if someone left that you don't really want to drink. And we'll let this come to a gentle simmer for about 20 minutes. So the game plan for today's cook, I'm going to cook this brisket fat side up. There's a ton of debate online about this, whether you do fat side down or fat side up. The general rule of thumb online is in a Kamado, as the heat's coming from the bottom, you put your fat side down to protect against the heat, and then offset where the heat is rolling over above, you put your fat cap up. Now I've tried this hundreds of different times, and the problem with putting your fat cap down in any style smoker, especially like a Kamado, is that fat will render and it'll become really soft, and we slice into it in the board, you just sort of lose the fat. You're removing a complete flavor or experience. And if you compare this to an offset brisket where the fat cap is up to a Kamado brisket where the fat cap is down, it's just not the same. It's similar, it's brisket, but it's missing something. And so I found with the double indirect method, that's going to help us protect from the bottom instead of the fat cap. Plus, we're going to not want to rob ourselves of that rendered fat experience up top. And this is where running a hotter, cleaner fire, and don't ignore it, that smoke is clean. Trust me, it smells great. But again, as I mentioned, it's -7, so we're seeing every little bit of smoke. But the running a hotter, cleaner fire up top is going to give us that radiant heat, and more importantly, the convection that we are missing in a Kamado, especially one as insulated as the Akorn is, in order to be able to render that fat cap properly. So we get nice, jiggly, yellow rendered fat on the top of our fat cap, and we're going to get the full brisket experience on a Kamado style grill. After about 2 hours on the grill, that's about the point where I want to start applying our mop sauce, and we're going to do that every 60 to 90 minutes as needed. Just keep an eye on it depending on how it's drying out. Your mileage, may vary from there. And after we reach an internal temperature somewhere around that 160 degrees is often when I like to move to a foil boat. Foil boat, if you haven't heard this method, this is where we have a couple choices. We could go unwrapped the whole way, which will take a little bit longer, and in a Kamado style grill, we run the risk of overdoing the bottom. We could do a paper wrap, which will speed it up a little bit and preserve some of our bark, and we could do a foil wrap, which will really speed it up, but it'll almost destroy our bark completely, especially in a Kamado style grill where we struggle to get that bark built by 160 versus something in my offset where I can actually get away with that. The foil boat is, I think, the perfect method for Kamados, and I use it on my Kamado style grills all the time, and not so much on my offsets, because what it really solves for is that bottom heat. It allows us to speed up our cook. It gives the top bark extended exposure to that smoke and heat, so we can build a bark, because it's just almost never ready at 160 degrees. And we get the benefit of a little bit faster cook. So it gains about 10 degrees Fahrenheit per hour versus the full wrap at 20 degrees Fahrenheit per hour, kind of roughly, but that's the general rule of thumb. So we'll keep this cook going, and when I see you in a little bit after our foil tower cooler rest, we'll be ready to slice into it and show how the perfect brisket method on the Char-Griller Akorn comes together with all of our tips and tricks, double, indirect, and our bark builder to make what looks like an offset smoked brisket. All right, I think it's time to come off for the rest. Let's just check for probe feel. I've given this 1 or 2 checks just while we were waiting to catch up, and I think that is right there. So we are 202, 203 in the flat, and since this is hard to see or guess what it should feel like, but that should feel like room temperature, sort of butter, peanut butter in terms of what it goes in. It just wants to fall right through. So let's get this off and rest. And I'll see you in a bit for the taste test. But before we do that, I'm going to actually bring you nice and close. We'll take a look at those wood chips that we added earlier, as well as our coal bed, to see if the 3 pieces of wood that we added are completely used up. Okay, let's first take a look at our ash collector. Oh, I like what I see there. That is much better than last time. I don't see any surviving wood chips. Let's go take a look inside our coal bed, see how that did with the 3 pieces of wood that we put down on the bottom. Our fire bricks and our original Char-Griller heat deflector. So we still overestimated the amount of charcoal that we need. But looking down here at the bottom, unlike before, I am not finding any evidence of fresh wood. So I definitely think the double indirect helped us burn wood better than any other method that I've used in the Char-Griller Akorn, as those 3 chunks of wood are gone as well for the first time. You know, wood chips or pellets or anything like that that we put in our bottom collector have been fully consumed. Let's shut this down, close it up, go over and do our taste test. All right, I've got it on the board, and I'll try and move quicker than our tallow will freeze in these sub-zero temperatures, but this certainly looks the part. I hope it tastes half as good as it looks. It looks pretty good inside. Let's get a couple slices out of our point. Okay, it certainly looks the part, looks like an offset. It's not going to, well, we'll give it a taste, but my guess here is it's not going to taste exactly the same, because again, we are cheating a little bit with our mop sauce and rub, so you get a little bit more of a crust than a bark, but to the blind eye, it certainly looks really good. So let's dig in. I'm going to start with the flat here. I carved out a little piece. Cheers. For a smoker, it's hard to get to smoke because it's so energy efficient. That is surprisingly smoky and good, like not in an over smoked way. That's really good. That's the flat. Let's dive into our point. Get a little bit of that board tallow before it freezes up on me. Cheers. Ooh, that's really good. 1 second. When I said we're saving the best for last for the Akorn, I'm not kidding. This is the best smoke that I've done on it so far, and I think it is absolutely a game changer. If you have a Char-Griller Akorn, you need to find a pizza stone or an extra set of deflectors, because this is just next level for this category of grill. In terms of flavor, how does it compare? Is it offset comparable brisket? No, like this is not in the same league in terms of smoke, but that's not to say we can't appreciate all the layers of flavor that we built here. So in terms of, you know, our rub, the core flavor is still salt and pepper. We added also the extra ingredients for a little bit more of our black color to simulate more what looks like you get off an offset versus sort of that red or something that looks like steak. So I'm not really able to taste a whole bunch difference, other than you're just getting sort of that really kind of maybe earthy flavor to go with it that sets off with the salt and the pepper. The mop sauce is what really stands out. This is where that extra, you know, onion, garlic, and a little bit of that hot sauce I'm able to pick up, and it is super pleasant. And then the smoke, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the scale of smoke, like we can go all the way over and maybe have a lot of smoke and perhaps bad smoke. We're not there. We can go over to, a couple years ago when I did a brisket on the Pellet Joe, and I said, that tasted a little bit like grandma's pot roast. We're way better than that. But are we in the kind of category of, offset for smoke? No, but I think this is going to be plenty enough to wow your friends, family, and if you've got a Char-Griller Akorn, you've been trying to smoke something like brisket, I think it's going to set a new personal best for you. Let me know down in the comments if you try the double indirect method on your Char-Griller Akorn, and if you're really happy with the results, because I think if it tastes anything like the one I've turned out today, you're going to be absolutely thrilled with it. That's it for today, though. I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up. It was good.